Welcome back to the Law of Relevancy podcast. I'm your host, Cord Owen. Today we're joined by an award-winning copywriter, trainer, and speaker, Nick Usborne. Nick joins us from our favorite neighbors to the north, and he's here joined by Zoom, and we're going to be talking about how AI is impacting the copywriting industry. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for the invitation. It's an honor. Glad to be here.
So you've been a thought leader in the copywriting space. This has historically been one of the most difficult areas for someone who does what we do, where we're creating marketing materials, we're building websites, we're trying to imagine content, and copywriters have always been a hugely important part of that process because not everybody can create content and copy. But now all of a sudden we've got this new companion writer that is unbelievably terrifying in AI. How are you seeing it affect your industry so far?
It's like I'm trying to keep my finger on the pulse. You know, I have a blog and I own social media and I'm connected to the industry fairly well. And it's all over the spectrum. It's like some people say, "Oh, don't worry about it. AI will never be good enough to threaten our jobs." Other people looking at it and thinking, "Well, actually, that's super scary. Am I still going to be able to make a living, in 2 or 3 years' time?" So it's all over. And I personally, I'm kind of leaning into it. One, because I'm fascinated by it and its capabilities. But also because my sense is if I want to survive this, I have to lean in and understand it completely and get ahead of it if I can.
Well, I think it's significant the way that you're approaching it, because when I was doing my show prep and learning about who you are, you started writing for the internet early on.
Right.
And so you've seen this kind of an inflection point in industry and this kind of a revolution happen firsthand before. And so, like me personally, when I got to experience this latest version of AI with generative AI and saw what it was capable of, it reminded me a lot of seeing the internet and the World Wide Web for the first time. And I knew that the only choice we have is to lean into it and to run right at it and try to be as good as you can at it.
That's always been my approach. And it's interesting you raised that because it came up in conversation. Oh, I suppose on LinkedIn yesterday, somebody was saying, "Oh, well, the bubble's going to burst. This isn't going to go anywhere." And I thought to myself, I've been here before because I published my first website in 1995. And then we had the second half of the 90s, which were just fascinating because it was all new and very interesting. And then, of course, we had the dot-com crash in 2001. And people were like, "Oh, my goodness, I told you, it's just a bubble. It's just a bubble." But then it turned out, of course, 2001 was just the beginning of the kind of exponential growth and impact of the web. And sometimes I feel we're in that similar space now. People are saying, "Oh, it's just a bubble. Don't worry, it'll pass. This can't really do anything significant." And I think back and I think, well, good luck with that. Because I think we're just at the beginning here.
Yeah, when I hear people say that, I'm imagining like roadkill, like I'm driving down the road and I'm seeing, it's just, there is, in my mind, I'm 100% confident this is going to change a lot about what we all do in any knowledge-based economy, because it's getting so difficult with how good that it's becoming. It's getting so difficult to distinguish between people-generated content and computer-generated content. And in some ways, when you get into the arts, even, whether it's writing music, writing lyrics, generating photography, there are these AI-generated versions of those pieces that are outstanding. They're really quite good. And so where are the places where you feel like you have the most competitive advantage, or as an actual writer, or where you feel like, hey, this is actually a good tool that could augment what I'm doing, not necessarily replace me?
Yeah, I use it and it's a kind of mind shift. I actually try to collaborate as much as I can with AI. I use it as the most knowledgeable assistant I could possibly have because it basically knows everything. So I don't use it like a search engine. I don't use it as some kind of slave to my purpose. I'll actually sometimes, and it took me a while to figure this out. I'll be asking it stuff, and then I'll step back and say, well, hang on, never mind how I might put that or structure that or the request I made. What do you think? What would you say? And you can have those kind of conversations with AI. And sometimes the feedback is really, really interesting. And I think the best results I've had with AI is where I get into this iterative kind of loop with these tools and get into conversation. And I try to listen as much as I speak. And a lot of people would tell me like I'm nuts and it's just a kind of word guessing algorithm and stuff. But it's actually very impressive. And then when people come back to me, and this happens to me all the time, like on LinkedIn, there's voices that come back and say, oh, this is just like a C minus writer or copywriter. And I kind of want to ask them, well, how are you using it? How are you writing the prompts? And very often the problem is with the prompt creator and not the model at all. So I've learned over, well, so about a year and a half now, I guess, to be a lot more sophisticated and open in the prompting that I do. And I was giving a class last week, and I showed this group of copywriters an example of how I prompted to have a blog post written in a very, very human voice. And I showed the prompts, I showed exactly how I'd done it. And then I opened up the text of the blog post and I said, well, what do you think? And it really is very, very human. You really would not guess. So when people say, oh, the output is wooden, the output is like is bad, it's poor, it's usually because they're not very good prompt writers.
Yeah.
Um,
I had an experience earlier this week where I was about to venture down a new path with some part of my business. And, you know, when you think about how these AI models are actually trained, how they're created, they're trained and created based off of huge amounts of data. And there's incredible libraries and resources that are compiled, and it does do like what you said. It's just a word guessing algorithm. In a way, it is, but it is also trying to emulate patterns that it finds. And the way that I was actually interfacing, in this case, it was OpenAI and ChatGPT, and we use other ones too. But I tried this new feature, and I'm going to try something that always backfires. But I'm going to try the live demo version. But there's this little headset next to the
Right.
input field here, and I was incredibly impressed because I was able to drive down the highway and interface with this app on my cell phone in a way that felt quite natural. And so I'm going to give it a shot right here. I'm going to try to ask it a similar question to what I asked you earlier, and let's see what it says. How might a professional copywriter use ChatGPT or other generative AI tools as an effective tool to make their writing better than writing alone?
I think you have to press it again, don't you?
Copywriter can use ChatGPT and other generative AI tools in several ways to enhance their writing and make their workflow more efficient. 1. Idea generation. AI can help generate a variety of ideas for headlines, taglines, or content themes quickly, providing a wide range of options to spark creativity. 2. Drafting speed. Copywriters can use AI to create initial drafts or parts of content. This helps speed up the writing process, especially for straightforward formulaic pieces like standard web copy or social media posts. 3. Style and tone adjustment. AI can adapt text to fit different styles or tones, assisting copywriters in tailoring their message to different audiences or branding guidelines. 4. Grammar and syntax checks. Beyond basic grammar checks offered by tools like Grammarly, AI can suggest stylistic improvements, making the writing more engaging or clearer. 5. SEO enhancement. AI tools can suggest...
Well, anyhow, I'm going to interrupt it because that can go on. But I was very impressed because of the conversational style of the answers. It felt very human
Right.
to me. And it usually at the end of giving an answer, it'll also ask a secondary follow-up question like, hey, did you want to focus on any one area, or do you want to address it more
Yeah.
broadly? And I'd
Yeah,
never ceased to
and
be
of course
amazed.
you can follow up and say, can you make that a little more conversational? And it'll maybe overdo it. You say, okay, dial that back 25%, and then it'll do another draft. So the first draft, the first output is very rarely the best you can get. It usually takes a bit of back and forth. But it's fascinating, but it's scary. I mean, I'm scared in a sense. I think it was just last week that WPP, which is the world's largest ad agency group, and it owns iconic agencies like Ogilvy and Wunderman Thompson and others. And WPP is doing a deal with Google to give it access to Gemini in the cloud throughout the agency group. And then, they're going to use Gemini as part of the creative process in ad agencies all over the world. So when you get a huge player like that leaning into this and basically saying, we're going to use, these are the agencies that support the biggest brands on the planet. And they're basically giving it a nod and saying, yes, we're going to use this tool and we're going to use it across the entire agency group. And it's like, okay, if those guys are leading into it, I really need to do the same.
There's no question. And it's proof that it's worth it to figure out how to, like, as in your words, collaborate with the tool.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
and I think that mindset is critical because there are a lot of people who feel adversarial with the tool, or otherwise they think of the tool simply as an algorithm, simply as like a search box or something, and they just use it as a tool, and they don't realize they can actually sit back and converse with this thing. It's like Ethan Mollick's new book, Co-Intelligence. I collaborate with this as a co-intelligence. And I know in a sense it's not, but in another sense it is, because it's really remarkable in the kind of outputs it can create.
in your writings, you touch a lot on incorporating emotional intelligence into the end result of what you're writing, whether you're collaborating with AI or whatever. Can you dig into that a little bit for us and help us understand what you mean by that?
Sure. So a couple of things here. Just as a copywriter, and I've been doing this for decades. I mean, any experienced copywriter will tell you that we make purchase decisions based on emotions. We buy stuff because we want it. It's an emotional thing. Then we'll often use our big prefrontal cortex to justify the purchase decision. But we buy stuff because we want to. It's an emotional thing. So emotion has always been at the forefront of selling. Smart copywriters, smart salespeople know this. So that's one reason. Now, the other reason I'm leaning into emotional intelligence is that if you go through that exercise again and actually with your phone and ask that model, what are the limitations or weaknesses with these tools, they'll very often come back and say, well, we don't get emotional nuance. So if you think about any of these models, they've never been in love. They've never experienced loss. They've never eaten an ice cream. They don't know what ice cream tastes like. They don't have that memory of that family vacation where we were all eating ice cream on the beach and dad dropped his on his shoe and we all laughed. They don't have those emotional touch points and memories. They don't have stories. They don't understand a lot of the kind of nuance in terms of relationships and emotion. Now, they get the basics because they've read love sonnets by Shakespeare. They've watched the movie Love Story. So they understand that humans have emotions, but they can't participate. They can't share in those emotions, which means that their output generally is not very emotionally rich or does not engage very well at an emotional level. So when I talk about, and I teach this a lot, like combining AI plus EI, emotional intelligence, there are two reasons. One is it improves the output. So I might use a tool like whatever it's going to be, Gemini or Llama or Chat GPT-4, to create and outline some ideas, and maybe a first draft. But then I'll take that draft, maybe a second draft, maybe I'll take that draft and I'll say, okay, this is what's missing here. And it's usually emotional. There's much emotional touch points. And emotion is so important because it's what actually engages us. And it's also what converts people who are interested in something to people who buy something. It's usually the emotion that kind of tips them over, converts a prospect into a buyer. But it's also, there's another thing that happens is that when you get a lot of people using these models, and let's say, millions of people are using ChatGPT, and a lot of those people, and let's say brands, let's say companies, marketing people within companies, they're all using, for the sake of example, all using GPT-4, and they're all using the same top 50 prompts, which they've picked up from LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. So if you use the same tool with the same library of prompts, you are going to, what I call, fall into the sameness trap. There will be a sameness in the output. And that's a huge problem if you're a marketer. Like your company might have invested tens of millions of dollars over the years, over decades, in separating your brand from the competitors, of giving it a unique feel and voice. And if you use these tools kind of unthinkingly on automatic, then all of a sudden you're going to sound exactly the same as your competitor. You'll be in that sameness trap, and you don't want that. You absolutely don't want that. It's a terrible thing. And it's the same with copywriters. I've heard feedback from people hiring copywriters through LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, you can use AI to help you write, prospecting messages to companies that might hire you. And I'm getting feedback now from companies saying this is a disaster, because all of the prospecting emails we're getting from copywriters all sound the same because they're all using the LinkedIn AI tool. So there's this sameness. And again, if you're a copywriter, if you're any professional looking for work, the worst thing you can do is sound the same as everyone else. You want to sound different. You want to sound very different. So that's one of the reasons why I say to people, never ever use AI alone in any kind of client-facing or even customer-facing interaction or messaging. What you want to do is use it, what it's really good at, which is like ideation, research, analysis, outline, structure, first drafts, but then take that and then weave in this layer of emotional intelligence, and put emotion into the output, and use that as your point of difference, and use that to protect your brand voice and your brand positioning.
Can I put you on the spot and ask you to give us 2 examples? Like an example where, or at least an example of something that is incorporating emotional intelligence into.
All right.
2 or 3
So I asked a while ago GPT-4 to write me, I think it was like a blog post relating to some experience that I'd had at a conference that I'd been to. And I gave it information on the conference, and I said, hey, just write me up something on this. And it did. And I read it, and it had that same kind of, it was really well written, and it was great. Like if I was working with an intern or a junior copywriter, this was just as good as what I might have expected. But I said, you know what, it's kind of lacking something. I said, why don't you, so at this point I said, look, go back and I want you to open with some kind of story or anecdote, because one of the things about going to conferences and events is actually the interactions you have with live people. So let's open with something like that, because this is going to sound a bit more human.
Right.
And make it like a tug a heartstring or something, like with this opening story. And it did. And it wasn't bad. But I thought, you know what? It actually reminded me of a real story from my own life when I went to a conference. So I gave it a clue as to what I wanted. Like bring story, bring human emotion into this right at the opening. And it did, but again, it was secondhand, and I actually had a real story. So it inspired me. It made me remember my story, which I then used in my own final draft. So sometimes it's as simple as something else that I do, and this is to me, this is all fascinating to me, but this is fascinating to me. What can be done here is, let's say I'm writing something about a product. Let's say it's a blender. So I'll go to Amazon and I'll copy 100 different reviews of this blender. And then if I was working for that company, I might say, hey, do you have some transcripts of customer service calls or text customer serve chatbot, interactions on this product? If so, please give me the transcripts. And I'll take all of this information, transcripts and reviews. I will paste it into, say, GPT-4. It could be Gemini, it could be Llama 3. And I'll say, hey, write me up a sentiment analysis. So what I'm doing there is I'm saying, please find the emotions within all of this data. And like 30 seconds later, it'll come out and say, hey, mostly positive. Here are the positive things people say, lots of emphasis on X, Y, Z. And here are a couple of negatives. So that's sentiment analysis. Like I've just pasted in like 100 reviews and a whole bunch of transcripts. And it spits this back out at me like in 30 seconds, which is astonishing because this is the kind of thing that these models are incredibly good at, analyzing huge chunks of data, which the human brain really struggles with. There's no way I could go through 100 reviews and kind of get a sense of the overall pluses and minuses. So then I look at that and I say, okay, that's cool. Identify for me the language, the phrases and terms people use when they are expressing, the positive side, when they love this product, when they're praising the product. I want to see the language they use. And it comes back and it gives me that language. So then I go back and I do another classic copywriting trick, which is not trick, it's just a way the human mind works, is I want to mirror what you say. So if you say to me, Nick, I'm feeling sad about my workplace environment, I might mirror back to you, particularly if I was your therapist, saying, hey, from what I'm hearing you say, you are upset about your workplace environment. I just mirror back the same phrase. And it's very, very powerful. Like negotiators do this, therapists do this. If you're smart, and this is a part of emotional intelligence. So I will take the language of people when they are feeling good about this. Then I say to GPT-4, this is the next stage, I say, hey, based on this language, and what I'm trying to do here is mirror the language of happy people with this product, write me a sales page or an email. So this is like and again, there's no way I could do this, go through this process without these tools. I'm saying, create me a sentiment analysis, identify the positive leaning language, use that language to mirror our prospects, and write something new for me. So there, I'm not creating the emotional input. I'm actually asking the model to identify the sentiment in a whole chunk of text.
It's like you're
and
engineering.
then I'll get it to use that to write.
It's the way you're describing it. It's as if you're engineering it.
Yeah, but I'm like, there's a kind of iteration here. I'm not just typing in one prompt and done. I'm going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And in my experience, that's always given me the best output. Like the more work you put in, the better. I mean, another thing I like to do if I want emotionally intelligent output, and so this isn't just me adding it later, but I want to kind of bring it out of the models, is I'll give one of these tools a lot of information about who I want the tool, like who's the speaker here. You are an expert at ABC. And then I'll give a lot of information about the audience and who they are and their demographics and psychographics and et cetera, et cetera. And I'll give it as much information as I can. And then I'll say, look, create me an avatar persona of an ideal customer based on everything I've told you, and include emotional touch points in that. And then I use that avatar of the ideal prospect. And I say, okay, we're going to write to this person now. Or I might even say, write in the voice of this person now. And I've had a lot of success with that, where I put in a lot of work to create the ideal avatar. And then I ask it to write either to the avatar or as the avatar. So again, it's just a matter of putting the effort in. So when people are circling back to earlier in the conversation, when people say, "Oh, I've tried these tools, the output is rubbish," I mean, I'm always tempted to, if I want to, if I want to continue the conversation, I'm always tempted to say, "Okay, show me the kind of prompts you're using." And when they get bad output, it's usually the problem is usually with the prompts.
It seems like you have a very strong fundamental understanding, though, of how these tools operate.
I don't have any technical background, but I've just spent countless hours, countless hours, because I'm a writer by trade. I'm fascinated by this and terrified by this. Because hey, like if I was in the first 5 years of my career, as opposed to, maybe I'll be retired in 5 years, who knows? If I was 5 years in from the beginning of my career, I would probably be a little more nervous because I think to myself, well, if this is what these tools can do now, what are they going to be capable of in 5 years or 10 years? And where does that leave me? And what is my role? How do I participate in this? How do I make a living out of this? And I think there are ways, but you have to, like we've both said, you have to lean in. You have to really lean in.
So what are some of the things you're doing now to help propagate more information about your approach to these tools and how it's going to affect your industry?
I write about it endlessly. I stay active on social media, sharing what I'm learning. I have a course devoted to teaching this whole approach of artificial intelligence plus emotional intelligence. So I'm just doing a lot of talking, a lot of writing, and a lot of teaching around this.
How is it being received by the different cohorts of demographics in terms of the age groups? So your peer group, then you've got the young group. How are the different attitudes to this technology?
That's interesting. I'm now this may be a reflection of the people who follow me and are connected with me. It may not accurately reflect different age groups. But I'm getting a lot of my responses from people like middle-aged, for 40s and up. I'm not hearing much from younger people, and maybe that's because they're just not my audience, or maybe it's because they're probably listening to different people. Um, and I'm seeing things, like I say, very divided. There are some people who actually get quite angry with me when I say lean into AI. It's like they see it as a betrayal in some way of the human craft of copywriting. Um, and I love the human craft of copywriting. Don't get me wrong. I've been a copywriter for over 40 years, and that wouldn't be the case if I didn't enjoy it, if I didn't love the craft. I do. But I can't ignore this. I don't, we ignore this at our peril. And this isn't just me as copywriters. It's like you say, it's anyone within the kind of knowledge industries, to my mind, has to be thinking in these same ways. So I get some quite extreme pushback. I get a lot of curiosity. A lot of people saying, well, hang on, tell me more, tell me more. People who spend more time with me and maybe listen to me on a webinar or on a podcast or take my course or engage a bit more deeply tend to fall down that same rabbit hole and become fascinated and excited by the whole thing. So I think there's a kind of required velocity here. This is just such an extraordinary technological shift. It's like surfing the big bad wave. You're either you're all in, or you're hitting the ground hard, I think. And it's like, again, it's not like I can't say I'm right. There's lots of people who disagree. And there was someone very knowledgeable I was talking with on LinkedIn last night, who was saying, I was making the point that, hey, these are very early. These are the Motorola brick cell phones of AI. Wait until we get to the iPhone version. And this guy, very smart guy, very successful, he was pushing back, and he said, no, I disagree. I don't think you can assume that these models will get any better. So that's a different mindset. And maybe he's right. I don't think he's right. I think almost inevitably these models will get better, and new models will turn up, which are even better. But not everyone thinks the same.
I've got a couple more questions for you. One of the problems with the models that's pretty well documented is a lot of them have built-in biases, because they're trained with bias. Yes. And so the outputs come with bias. And so as a copywriter, there's all different kinds of assignments. There's all different types of points of view. How do you know whether the information you're getting back has a bias, and how do you deal with it? It seems like your avatar approach is one way to kind of minimize the ability for the model to give you back something with built-in bias because you're explicitly telling it how you want it to
Right.
approach the problem. Are you seeing this
Right.
bias in your research and in your using, or how are you handling it?
It's a great question. So almost flippantly, I'll say, well, people have biases too. So if I give my information from a book, there's going to be biases there from the author and the people they gather around. So that's true, but not very helpful, slightly flippant. I think it's really important, and it depends very much on the audience you're writing to. And like you say, to the point with the avatar, you need to instruct the model as to, okay, this is the audience that I'm speaking to, and they have these certain beliefs, and they have, this is who they are. So don't write to me,
Right.
write to the avatar. I think coming out of Silicon Valley, as many of these models do, there is a left-leaning bias. And I probably fit that same model. I'm probably more left-leaning than right-leaning. So it's very easy for me to get comfortable with this and say, hey, there's no bias. I play with this every day. I don't feel any bias at all. But that's because it's me. But I think it's a very legitimate point. And I think in time, people will. Elon Musk is, I think, attempting with Grok to offer a different perspective and not a different bias, but coming from a different direction or different place. And I think that's important. I don't think all of these models should follow, have one point of view.
Yeah,
And
maybe
that becomes the best one.
maybe it becomes a lot like cable news, where there's a channel for every bias.
A channel for every bias. But that said, I think there is, and again, maybe I'm dreaming. But there's been some interesting work done on using these models to actually moderate extreme beliefs in either direction.
Sure.
Of getting into conversation with these models where they actually challenge you. And this can be left-leaning or right-leaning, where the model actually challenges that leaning and says, well, is that entirely, and then it'll go back and it'll get in conversation. And I was listening to somebody talking about this and saying that, I wish I could give you something specific. I don't remember. I think it was a podcast. I don't remember the name. But what was happening is that someone who had a very extreme view on something was persuaded otherwise by one of these models, not to completely change, but to moderate that view. And when interviewed afterwards, said, well, how come the AI could shift your belief systems, whereas a friend or family member or someone else couldn't? And the person, I thought it was a very thoughtful response. He said, because it's not a person. I don't feel that I have to, I don't feel a personal attack from someone else who doesn't share my belief system. I was just talking to this basically computer. So yes, I think there will be models that express different viewpoints, but I also, perhaps naively, but hopefully not, believe that use of these models can actually be for good to help, because we're very, in both of our lifetimes, a lot of stuff has changed, and there's lots more division today, I think, than we saw 10 or 20 years ago. And maybe these tools can help with that. Maybe they can help all of us kind of moderate our views slightly and find more common ground. That's me being romantic, but I believe it's possible.
That's definitely a silver lining. I know personally, one of the silver linings that I see, and one of the things about our own brains that have surprised me, I get a ton of these unsolicited AI generated emails every day. I get tons and tons of them. But initially, a year and a half ago, I would get one and I'd be like, wow, this is, it's well written. It seems like a person. And then quickly I caught on within a few days of like, oh, this must be AI generated. And now I can almost instantly recognize them as AI generated. And it gives me a lot of hope that maybe our brains are still more powerful than some of these large language models.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of when I talk about nuanced emotions, it's the nuances that these models don't quite get, certainly yet. And that, I think, is where we can, as writers, as marketers, knowledge workers, we can stay ahead, and we still have value, and we still have jobs and work to do. Because, like you say, the more we get bombarded with just straight AI generated content of kind of medium quality, because people haven't really worked terribly hard on the prompts, the more we become aware of that, and the more we kind of insulate it, like, okay, here it is. I mean, as soon as you recognize that it's AI, the company has lost. All right, because we're not going to respond in the way they want when we have that moment of recognition. We're never going to say, "Oh, that's written by AI. Hey, it's so good, I'm going to buy right
Yeah.
now." It's always a sense of slight, perhaps, letdown or disappointment when we realize that it wasn't a person taking the trouble to write to us at all. It was just an AI model.
I love the ones that
So
say, did you get my previous email? As if it were a real person.
I know. And it's like, I was talking to a colleague who's in the business to business space, and in B2B, often the kind of buying cycle is much longer, and you're connected with a person and going back and forth with questions of, well, can you provide me some white papers or some whatever it is. And he talked about an experience where one of these companies was using AI for that client-facing interaction back and forth. And the buyer was close to buying. And then suddenly there was something in one of the communications that kind of tripped him up in his mind. And he said, hang on, is this AI generated? And he suddenly realized he hadn't been interacting with the person, he'd been interacting with one of these models. And he immediately abandoned that sale, that possible sale, because he felt, in fact, betrayed. There had been no transparency. No one had told him he would be interacting back and forth by email with a bot. He thought it was Lawrence or Sally or however it was signed. And when he realized it wasn't, he felt betrayed. He felt misled. He felt that he had been lied to in some way. And he was like, forget it, goodbye. So yeah, we have to be careful with how we kind of deploy this and use this. And there's this concept of the human in the loop. So the human in the loop, when you're developing one of these models, is the thing that looks out for biases and racism and just errors, hallucinations. But I think after, when you're using this, our role, if we want to continue to have a role, is to be the human in the loop, to look at this stuff and say, well, hang on, are we being transparent? Should we perhaps have told this prospective customer that we were going to use AI? Yes, you probably should have done. But the human in the loop, once we start using this, is that we have this job of where we apply judgment, we insert emotion, we make sure it has more of a human feel. So I think companies and individuals who go all in on the technology will not be the best performers. I think the companies and individuals who come in with a human in the loop, as it were, that human touch, that emotional touch, are going to be the people who really kind of do well with this.
Yeah, I totally agree. Nick, as we wrap up here, could you please give us some places where we can find some more of your writings, where we can follow you? And
sure.
I think you
I guess it
prepared
also
a landing page for this podcast as well.
Indeed, yeah. So just if you just go to my website, which is Nick Usborne, NickUsborne.com, and you'll find my blog there. You'll find my courses there. And if you go to nickusborne.com/LOR, that's the landing page for this podcast. And there's a couple of downloads. There's a free download. There's a sign up opportunity. There's a link to my course on AI plus EI. So yeah, nickusborne.com is where it all begins and ends.
We'll definitely check that out. And you can check out this podcast anywhere where podcasts are found. You can also find us at thelawofrelevancy.com and also the Bake More Pies social media feeds. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time. Nick, thank you.
Well, thank you. That was fun.